Welcome back, everybody, for my portfolio update for September 2025. And we've been on a great run over the past 20 plus months or so, but last month we trailed the indexes by quite a bit. So it kind of begged the question of if our run was coming to an end or not. Because you have plenty of people out there saying that the market's at a top, AI's a bubble, and all the things that you normally hear, well, just about all the time. Now, as for me, believe it or not, this is again a month where I didn't really do anything to my portfolio, no buys or sells for the second month in a row. So let's see where I actually ended up. And now we're back in Snowball Analytics, and as of October 1st, my account is currently at $465,601 on the dot, which I don't know that that's ever actually happened before. So if we take a look at the actual breakdown, I've adjusted this to see how we did for September only. We see that my account value was up $20,844 for the month in terms of just dollar value. And if we look at performance only, we see that performance was up $20,044. And so again, that's because I had my normal $800 a month contribution. And so that's the difference between those two numbers. But look, we're getting at a point to where having a $20,000 positive month really isn't that big a deal anymore. I mean, it's pretty crazy to even think about, but it's progress. So if we look at the breakdown, we see that it was mostly capital gains of $19,925 with $119 in dividends. Now, as you can see for September, we dipped at the beginning for like a day and then basically went straight up. And at one point we were up almost 6% in the month before coming back down to reality a bit. But let's go ahead and see how we did against the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100. Now, for the month, my portfolio was up 4.5%, with the S&P 500 up 3.27%, accounting for my own buys and sells, which again, I didn't have any. And then the Nasdaq 100 was up 5.25%. So we beat out the S&P 500 this month by over 1 percentage point, but we trailed the Nasdaq 100 by about 0.75 percentage points. Now, first glance when I saw this, I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. Like we were trailing the Nasdaq, but just taking a step back, I mean, 4.5% in a month is pretty good, and I'm going to show you how good it's actually been here in a minute. Now, if we just take a look at where we stand year to date, we see that my portfolio was up 30.26%, with the S&P 500 now up 14.53%, and the Nasdaq up 17.67%. So again, these are based on the timing of my own buys and sells. So we're still beating both indexes pretty handily year to date, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out in the last few months of the year. Now, if we take a look at the performance of my portfolio since I started it on December 8th, 2022, we see that my portfolio is up over 87%, the S&P 500 is up just under 67%, and the Nasdaq 100 is up 102%. So since inception, we're outpacing the S&P by over 20 percentage points, but still trailing the Nasdaq by about 13 or 14 percentage points overall. And this is really where taking a step back and just looking at certain time frames when things happened can really help give us a perspective on how far we've come, right? Because if you remember, back in January 2024 was when I started making a lot of changes in my portfolio. And if we just take a look at my performance versus the indexes, especially the Nasdaq 100, back in 2023, it was pretty terrible. So even though we're still trailing the Nasdaq since inception, if we just take a look at the performance as I started making those changes back in January 2024, you can see that my portfolio was up 70%, with the S&P up 40% and the Nasdaq up just 46%. So what that means is that since adjusting the approach, we've been crushing the index by almost 24 percentage points. And even with that, we're still trailing since inception because of how my portfolio did in 2023. But look, this is the type of progress that you want to see. I mean, at the end of the day, you have a goal, you have an idea of how you want to get there, so you try it, you put it in motion, and at least up to this point, it's worked really well. Now, if we take a look at what I bought and sold for the month, well, again, it was nothing. So I added my normal contribution, but there wasn't anything that really struck me as wanting to buy right now. Now, we're going to see why here in a minute, but at this point, I'm a little disappointed that I didn't just put all my cash into Palantir back in June whenever I added it to my portfolio. And I talked about how, I was just going to add half my cash because at the time, I wasn't really sure if the price was going to come down a bit, and it really hasn't. It's gone the opposite way. And ultimately, I guess out of all the possible scenarios, it's still a good one since it's been a good performer, but I just have some cash waiting around. Now, if you're wondering about my Pinterest options and my leaps that I talked about last week, well, that trades in a different brokerage account where I normally just hold cash. Like I've never included that balance in any of this before because I wasn't investing that money, so it didn't make sense to include it with my total portfolio size. So maybe in the future, I'll add add these to the broader portfolio, but at this point I'm just kind of experimenting, so it's kind of its own thing, and we'll just kind of monitor it and see if it makes sense to add later. But just for transparency, that position is down quite a bit so far, about 20% or so in the red. But again, the reason why I did long-dated calls is that I have until January 2027 to hit $38 a share or so to break even. So I still feel really good about that position. It just might take a little bit longer than I initially expected. But what you might notice is that there's another position in there that's for AMD, and those are January 2026 calls at $140 strike price. And I just added those yesterday, and I posted a YouTube community post for it. And ultimately, AMD's chart just looked really good, and you guys know that I think anything related to data centers and AI and chips is going to continue to go up. I mean, at the end of the day, NVIDIA, TSM, AMD, Broadcom, Intel, they're probably all going to be winners just because that space in general is a winner. So this is merely a bet on AMD going up as we get towards the end of the year. But remember, these aren't long-term investments that I'm doing, and they're only barely fundamental investments. So I'm only sharing it for the folks that were interested, the ones that wanted to follow kind of my options experiments, and the people that understand that this is, riskier behavior, and most people probably shouldn't do it. So with that said, let's get back to my long-term portfolio and take a look at my updated portfolio weights. Now, NVIDIA is still in the top spot at 17.79%. Amazon is next at exactly 15%. And TSM is third at exactly 12%, which is just weird. You have Meta fourth at 10.25%. Cloudflare is at just under 10%. Visa is next at 7.33%. Coinbase jumped back up this month at 7.25%. Snowflake's at 6.83%. Google is at just over 6.5%. Palantir is now just under 4%. And Cash is at 3.2%. Now, if we take a look at what holdings performed the best over the past month, Taiwan Semiconductor was by far the best performer this month, up almost 21%. Palantir was next at over 16%. Google continued its nice run up over 14%. Coinbase was up just under 11%. NVIDIA up over 7%. And Cloudflare was up 2.82% on the month. And now for my 4 negative holdings this month, Meta was down just over 0.5%, Visa was down almost 3%, Amazon down over 4%, and Snowflake was down almost 5.5%. So if we take a look at which holdings have performed the best overall, and remember this is just price return since I take my dividends in cash to reinvest manually, Cloudflare is still in the top spot at 113%, NVIDIA now over 100% at 108, and that position has made me a whopping $43,000 in gains, which is not bad when you consider the fact that when I added it back in March of 2024, a lot of people really said that, hey, NVIDIA's at the top, what are you doing? And I had so much conviction in it at the time that not only did I add it to my portfolio in March, but I made it my biggest holding in April of 2024. And so it's just really nice to see that one being one of my best performers. Next is Google, up over 60% now, which is pretty awesome. Meta up just under 48%. TSM up over 45%. Coin up 41.5%. And Visa up almost 39%. Now, next is Palantir, the other much maligned decision that I made, up 29%, even buying at a 600 plus PE. So does valuation actually matter? I don't really know in this market. We have Amazon up 28%, but it's definitely been lagging pretty much everything else in my portfolio. And lastly, Snowflake is up over 25%. And so look, one of the things that you notice here is that all of my positions are not only in the green, but none of them are lower than a 25% total gain. And obviously that doesn't tell the whole story, because if you're up 25%, but you've held for 3 years, then that's not necessarily all that good. But I think it's just another example of how the decisions that we've made over the past 20 plus or so months have just worked out really well. Like, there's a lot of really strong performers. And now the reality is that most stocks are simply going to go up as the money supply goes up anyway. So it's really easy to look smart in a bull market, but based on what the goal was, we've done really well. Now, if we take a look at my investment income, specifically for the next 12 months, we see that my annual dividends and interest are at $1,160.66, which is identical to what it was in August. And I honestly don't know if that's ever happened before. So now in terms of overall dividend yield for my portfolio, it's now 0.26%. And in terms of what actual dividends I received this month, on September 2nd, I got $59 from Visa. On September 15th, I got $26.25 from Google. And on September 29th, I got $34.14 from Meta, for a total of $119.39 in dividend income for the month. All right, so let's take a look ahead to next month and what holdings I think I'm going to be adding to going forward. Now, in terms of my current allocation, the only one that I want higher allocation to right now is still Palantir, which hasn't changed. And like I mentioned, I'd been waiting for the price kind of to come down, but that really hasn't happened. So it might be one of those cases where I just wait for Palantir to dip, or the next time that it dips, or maybe even just try to DCA into it, because Palantir for me is a pretty easy one. It's going to be probably a multi-year hold for me. I really do think the enterprise AI investment cycle is just ramping up, and Palantir is uniquely kind of positioned to take advantage of that. So, it's a little disappointing because I wish I would have used my cash, but I may just end up buying it, and we'll just see what happens over the next month or so. In terms of ones I think are good value right now, I feel like I'm a broken record every month when I talk about these, but honestly, NVIDIA and Taiwan Semi are the ones that still look the most attractive when you factor in projected growth. And the reality is that I've been saying these two names almost every single month for what feels like a year or so now. And it's just crazy because everyone's talking about how, they've gone up so much already, they're overvalued, AI is a bubble, and all that other stuff. But what I've said about them has been the same this whole time. The demand exceeds the supply for what their product is, and they're the two premier providers of the products and services that they provide. NVIDIA being the premier chip designer and AI infrastructure company in the world, and TSM being the premier foundry in the world. And look, if we look 1 year in the past for NVIDIA, they're up 57% over the past 12 months, and TSM is up 58%. And those were names that everybody knew were quality. They're names that I've been saying every month look attractive based on their growth. And so I just really feel like this stuff doesn't need to be that hard. I think sometimes the biggest challenge is us getting out of our own way and getting in our own head about it. But all right, like we do every month, let's review my portfolio strategy. My purpose is to provide a high quality of life for my family in retirement, so we never have to worry about money. My goal is to beat the S&P 500 in total return by 20% or better without impacting how much quality time I can spend with my family. And then lastly, my strategy is to attach myself to companies who have tangible market advantages that align with secular trends and are generating increasing cash flows with efficient capital allocation. All right, so in terms of the family update this month, we're back to me being terrible at capturing anything that's going on in my life. So yeah, we've been doing stuff. We still have our weekly kind of family dinners and all that, but you wouldn't be able to know if you looked at my camera roll. But my daughter is back in school volleyball, so that takes up a lot of our time. And they just won their early season tournament in September, which is cool because last year they came in second, so they were all excited. And while I don't have a picture of us out eating, I do have one of the fortune I got at dinner one night. And we all had a good laugh about how perfect that one was for me specifically, but hey. Plus, with all the time I've been spending building stock bites, my dog has been a little bit neglected and getting annoyed with me. Now, most days he looks at me disappointedly like this, and then when I take him outside, he turns his back to me like I'm not even there. But I took him to get groomed the other day, and they gave him a bandana, so he was a happy boy again. And honestly, most of my day outside of the work that I'm doing on a daily basis is dealing with him, so he's not that neglected. And then lastly, it's not really a family update, but I finally got off the waiting list for the Coinbase credit card. Now, this is the one that automatically gives you rewards in Bitcoin, and they honestly had the coolest card packaging that I've ever seen. And if you don't know what that is, that's the Bitcoin white paper kind of superimposed on the black packaging for the card, which is just super cool. And of course, the card itself has the Bitcoin Genesis block printed on the front as the design. Obviously, if you watch the channel for a while, you know that I'm an early kind of Bitcoin believer. And so, getting rewards back in Bitcoin probably beats getting them in airline miles or even cash if you think about long-term potential of what those rewards could be worth. So yeah, I thought it was really cool. Obviously not sponsored or anything. You guys know I love Coinbase. I hold in my portfolio and I just love the card. All right, so if I recap what happened this month, the portfolio was up 4.5% and outpaced the S&P, but trailed the Nasdaq. We're still crushing the S&P and Nasdaq year to date and the S&P since inception. And our performance since January 2024 has really kind of validated the changes that we made back then. So how did all you guys do for September? Let me know down in the comments. Now, if you want to see my breakdown about Intel and why people keep investing into it, you can watch that by clicking this video right here. Hope you guys have a great day out there. Financial independence is true freedom. So keep building and stacking wins, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.